Black privilege in Sweden is when you go and sit inside a train, okay? Public transport, you sit and you have a next seat to you. Do you know? Nobody comes and sits next to you. You can put your legs, you can enjoy your life. Like, you know, I've been driving so much, I didn't know that I actually had a black privilege in Sweden. Like, people pass by and they see you and they're like, they'll go to the next neighbor like, can I sit next? I'm like, yes! Even when all the seats are filled up, they decide to stand up and hold it. Like, we have the best black privilege in Sweden. You have enough space? No, I forgot to say, right? For you to enjoy the full black privilege, you just have to pray that there's no any other black person that comes along. Because if that black person comes, yeah, they're going to take that privilege away from you because they want to sit with you. They also don't want to sit.
This experience, described humorously as black privilege in Sweden, actually shows a troubling issue. It might seem like a small win to have an empty seat next to you on public transport, but the reality behind this lighthearted joke is much more painful. It shows that there are still people in Sweden showing discomfort or reluctance to sit beside a black person. Needless to say, we know it actually isn't a privilege at all. It's a quiet form of exclusion that many black Swedes experience in their everyday lives. Racism in Sweden always takes these subtle forms. It's not always loud or obvious, but can show up in the small, everyday moments, like someone choosing not to sit next to you on the bus. It's a form of being othered, where people, sometimes without even realizing it, keep their distance from black individuals simply because of the color of their skin. And while it may seem minor, these moments add up, leaving many black Swedes feeling isolated or unwelcome, even in the most public spaces. It's not the obvious and vocal acts of racism that hurt the most. Sometimes it's the continuous subtle ones. Sweden is often celebrated for its progressive values, social equality, and openness to diversity. But if you dig a little deeper, you'll find that things aren't as perfect as they seem, especially when it comes to racism towards black people. Sure, the racism here might not be as overt or violent as in other parts of the world, but it's still very real. It shows up in ways that are quieter, like microaggressions, exclusion, and systemic barriers that hold people back. Today, we will explore this frequently ignored part of Sweden and reveal these unheard struggles so we can truly understand how it feels to be black in Sweden. In the video, you can see how a poorly executed cake was created to celebrate cultural heritage. The cake design is really disrespectful and shows how insensitive people can be about race. Cultural identities should never be turned into silly stereotypes, as it makes it seem like the historical struggles of black people don't matter. In today's world, where people are working for respect and understanding, this kind of art is not just old-fashioned, it's hurtful. And this happened in Sweden. Artists need to be aware of how their choices can impact others and remember that their work should uplift, not offend.
One day I was out with my friends, and then there come some people that say, vad gör du här? Like, what are you doing here? Du tillhör inte vårt land, eller something like that. Like, it's not your country. What are you doing here? And it's only like you went there to buy some hamburger to eat.
This is a classic example of how a black individual's everyday interactions can turn challenging. In this scenario, a black man simply wants to enjoy his meal, but finds himself interrupted by people harassing him, questioning why he's in Sweden. Simple acts like these are what we could call microaggression. Black people in Sweden frequently encounter these in their everyday lives. These microaggressions, though seemingly small and insignificant, accumulate over time and contribute to a broader experience of exclusion. Studies show that black Swedes always face comments that question their identity or belonging, like when people are surprised that they speak fluent Swedish. This reaction reinforces the assumption that black individuals don't belong or aren't truly Swedish. Additionally, according to a 2019 report by Sweden's Equality Ombudsman, black Swedes face more frequent challenges to their qualifications or education, which are often called into question simply because of their race.
So try to step out to explore the city a little bit for a second, and as usual, we get stopped by police.
How long are you here on vacation?
Till Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
Vacation.
Just relaxing, having fun?
How long have you been here in Sweden?
We came 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, after I snitched, I went to get some tardig and some other amazing Persian food. Food was great, and then on my way out, oh, surprise, surprise.
Yes, sir. I've already been stopped today. Yeah. Second time.
Hey.
How are you?
Good?
I'm good, thank you.
Where are you going?
We're dropping my friend home. And on the way home, we get stopped again. So at this point, I'm convinced the female police officers fancy me. So I'm just going to start dropping game.
For no reason, I get
Hi, how are you?
stopped. But yes,
I'm good, how are you?
Not too bad, not too bad.
Because we thought that you were driving a bit weird.
No, you guys were driving the same way.
Yeah, of course we are. If you're going like this, we're going after you, of course. So where are you from?
No, we're from London.
From London, okay.
Yeah.
How come you're in Sweden?
We just came for a quick holiday.
On holiday
Nice.
or?
Have you been here before?
No, my first time.
Really?
So I hop in the back seat and decided I'm not driving anymore. I give up. And
no.
It's we're used to it now.
Five times Sweden. I've been here 5 days, 5 times again.
And on that note, Sweden, take care. Never again.
In this video, this black man is just trying to explore the city and enjoy his day and gets stopped by the police. Not once, but twice. He's simply going about his business, grabbing some food, dropping off a friend. But to the police, his presence alone raises suspicion. It's these seemingly small, everyday occurrences that pile up and remind black individuals they're often viewed as outsiders, no matter how long they've been here or how integrated they are in Swedish society.
They acclaimed this lady. I think she was in her 40s. She was quite short, and she was like, "Excuse me." So I put my head like this down to hear what she has to say, and then she this is crazy, guys. She whispered in my ear. She was like, "Hello, you monkey. Can you go back to Africa? Go back to Africa, you monkey." She repeated it. I'm like, oh my god. As soon as she said that, she disappeared. She disappeared like wind. Like I didn't see her again.
This brings us to a disturbing example of the type of blatant racism that can still surface in Sweden. A black woman was just going about her day when a stranger, out of the blue, approached her. She leaned in and, in a low voice, spat out a hateful, racist comment, telling her to go back to Africa in the most dehumanizing way. The woman quickly walked away, leaving behind the emotional weight of her words. This kind of hostility might not be something that fits into Sweden's reputation as a progressive and equal society, but it happens. And it's a reminder that racism here can be both quiet and explosively direct. It's not always subtle or hidden in policies. Sometimes it's an unprovoked verbal attack, hitting deep and personal.
So the guy just walked up to us again and said, "I'm sorry, we can't let you guys in because you guys didn't sound good and you look drunk." We're like, "Why? We are not drunk. We haven't been drinking." He said, "No, you guys look drunk and you have red eyes." I'm like, "What? Red eyes? Look at our eyes. What do you mean by our eyes are red?" I mean, I haven't even changed. I'm still the same way we were there. He said, "We have red eyes. We can't go in." I'm like, "We are not acting anything weird. And secondly, this is how you don't know how a black person's eye, a black guy's eye looks like. And look at this. Everybody's eye is red. What do you mean by we have red eyes, we can go in?" And we literally saw him take someone that looked even more drunk than us. He let the guy in and let another guy in and then blah, blah, blah. And then he said, he's not going to talk to us. So my friend said, "Is it because we are black?" And then he got so offended. He's like, "You have to leave now. You have to leave now."
Here's another frustrating example of how racism can manifest in everyday situations. This time, it's a man and his friend trying to get into a club, just like anyone else looking to enjoy their night. But instead of being allowed in, they're stopped at the door. The bouncer claims they look drunk and have red eyes, despite the fact that they hadn't been drinking and were acting completely normal. The man tries to reason with the bouncer, explaining that his eyes aren't red and that the comment doesn't even make sense. But here's where it gets even more absurd. While they're being denied entry, they notice other people who actually look drunk being let in without a problem. This blatant double standard leaves them wondering if their treatment is because of their race. When they question the bouncer, his response is immediate. He's offended, and suddenly they're asked to leave. These everyday experiences of black individuals are compounded by Sweden's approach to race, often described as colorblind. While Sweden's colorblind approach to race is mostly well-intentioned, it actually creates an environment where the realities of racism can be easily ignored. It suggests that by not acknowledging race, equality will naturally follow. On the surface, it appears progressive, as it aligns with the notion that everyone should be treated the same, regardless of skin color. But the problem is, race does matter. It shapes people's life experiences, especially for Black Swedes and other minority groups. By adopting a colorblind stance, Sweden runs the risk of overlooking the systemic issues that disproportionately affect Black people. Instead of recognizing racial inequality as a real, ongoing problem, it becomes invisible under the assumption that if race isn't acknowledged, it must not exist as an issue. This means that the struggles of Black Swedes, from microaggressions to more significant barriers, are left unaddressed. In a society that doesn't recognize race, it's much harder for individuals to voice their concerns about discrimination without being dismissed. After all, how can one discuss a racial problem in a country where race is said not to matter? This creates a frustrating and alienating experience for people of color, as their struggles are minimized or outright ignored. The colorblind approach, rather than fostering true equality, may actually contribute to the persistence of inequality by silencing discussions about race and racism altogether. Now that we've tackled many of the personal experiences Black people have faced in Sweden, let's talk about the racist behavior of the country itself, according to historical data, to fully understand present-day racism in the country. While Sweden is not as well known as other European powers when it comes to colonialism, it did participate in the transatlantic slave trade during the 18th century. Sweden's involvement began when it acquired the Caribbean island of St. Barthélemy in 1784 and turned it into a center for the enslavement and trade of Africans. Although Sweden officially abolished slavery in 1815, it allowed foreign traders to engage in the practice on the island until 1847. This aspect of Sweden's history, documented by historians like Frederick Thomasson, is often overlooked when it shouldn't be. It's an existing proof that the country has not been immune to the global history of racial exploitation. Fast forward to the 20th century, and Sweden was home to the world's first National Institute for Racial Biology, established in 1921. The institute was part of a broader eugenics movement that sought to preserve racial purity. This ideology led to the forced sterilization of more than 60,000 people who were deemed racially inferior. Policies like these remained in place until the 1970s, according to research by the Broberg and Tiden. While Sweden has made strides in moving away from these eugenic practices, the subtle attitudes toward race have not entirely disappeared. A deeper look into Sweden's history reveals a present-day rise in Afrophobic hate crimes in the country. Between 2008 and 2014, incidents of Afrophobic hate crimes surged by 24%, according to statistics from the Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention. This significant increase stressed a disturbing trend, where Black Swedes and those of African descent face more frequent and targeted acts of violence and discrimination. While Sweden has long prided itself on being a society built on tolerance and inclusion, the rise of these hate crimes is telling us that is not the case. It's becoming a place where racism is proving to be increasingly blatant. Much of this rise can be attributed to the growing influence of far-right nationalist parties, particularly the Sweden Democrats. Originally seen as a fringe group, the Sweden Democrats have gained considerable political power in recent years by pushing anti-immigration policies and leveraging fears about the cultural impact of immigrants and refugees. Their rhetoric, while not directly aimed at Black people, has stoked xenophobia across the country and has created a more hostile environment for all people of color. These Afrophobic hate crimes are not just isolated incidents, though. They are part of a larger political issue in Sweden. Far-right parties like the Sweden Democrats have capitalized on the anxieties of a changing demographic, using anti-immigration sentiments as a tool to gain votes. As a result, the political discourse in Sweden has changed, allowing for more overt displays of racism and making it easier for individuals with racist ideologies to act on their beliefs. What's even more concerning is the normalization of these attitudes in everyday life, where hate crimes are not only more frequent, but also more accepted by segments of society. For Black Swedes, this creates an atmosphere of fear and insecurity. The threat of physical violence, verbal abuse, or being targeted because of their race adds another layer to the systemic racism they already face in areas like employment and housing. Addressing this surge in Afrophobic hate crimes is not just a matter of law enforcement, as it requires a broader societal change that tackles the xenophobic and racist attitudes fueling this violence. If left unchecked, this growing trend could further erode the very values of equality and tolerance that Sweden has long been known for. In addition to the rise in hate crimes, the lack of media representation is another factor that contributes to the marginalization of Black Swedes. In any society, the media is a powerful force that shapes public perception and societal norms. Unfortunately, in Sweden, Black individuals are greatly underrepresented in mainstream media, from television and film to news outlets and advertising. This underrepresentation sends a subtle but potent message that Black people don't quite belong in the broader Swedish narrative. When Black people are depicted in Swedish media, it often comes with heavy stereotypes. Research by Mångkulturellt Centrum, or Multicultural Center, reveals that Black characters, when they do appear, are frequently cast in roles that reinforce negative or limiting stereotypes, portrayed as criminals, foreigners, or in positions of servitude. These portrayals feed into the harmful notion that Black Swedes are somehow other or not fully part of Swedish society. What's even more troubling is the lack of positive Black role models in Swedish media. Few characters or public figures exist in prominent positions that show Black individuals as important parts of Swedish society. This is the absence that silences the experiences of Black Swedes. As the country fails to reflect its diversity in its media, it marginalizes the Black community and sends a message that their stories are not worth telling. This issue of invisibility extends beyond the media, as it also gets quite political. In a country that prides itself on democracy, equality, and inclusivity, Swedish politics remain overwhelmingly homogenous and dominated by white politicians. Even the Swedish National Election Studies itself reports that the number of Black Swedes in positions of power is alarmingly low. And for those few Black Swedes who do manage to break through into politics, the challenges don't stop there. Many report facing racism and discrimination within political institutions, often in the form of microaggressions or being marginalized in policy discussions. These experiences can make it quite difficult for Black politicians to advocate effectively for their communities, as their presence and opinions are frequently sidelined or devalued. Of course, this lack of representation has real consequences. Political decisions on housing, education, employment, and social policies that disproportionately affect Black communities are often made without the input of those who are most impacted. As a result, systemic issues like racial discrimination in the job market or unequal access to housing are left unaddressed or inadequately handled, reinforcing the cycle of exclusion. While there have been some recent attempts to promote diversity in Swedish politics, they have yet to make a huge progress. For many Black Swedes, the feeling remains that the system doesn't truly see or hear them. Until political institutions become more inclusive, this lack of representation will continue the trend of inequality. Now, beyond political and legal efforts, housing discrimination remains one of the most insidious forms of systemic racism faced by Black Swedes. Despite Sweden's outwardly progressive policies, the reality is that Black Swedes often face challenges when seeking housing. Lots of studies, including those conducted by the Equality Ombudsman, reveal that Black individuals are not only more likely to be denied housing compared to their white counterparts, but they also face worse rental terms, from higher rents to fewer protections under lease agreements. These discriminatory practices, often subtle yet deeply entrenched, reinforce racial segregation across Swedish cities. One of the key consequences of this housing discrimination is the concentration of Black Swedes in lower-income neighborhoods, which are typically under-resourced and offer limited access to good schools, health care, and job opportunities. These areas, often marked by economic stagnation, create an environment where the cycle of poverty becomes nearly impossible to break. The segregation that results from discriminatory housing practices prevents Black Swedes from integrating into broader Swedish society, physically separating them from communities with more resources and social mobility. When Black Swedes are forced to live in areas with fewer opportunities, they are further removed from the chance to network, grow, and access the same economic and social opportunities that are readily available to their white counterparts. This isolation only deepens the racial divide and feeds into existing stereotypes and biases. It reinforces negative perceptions that hinder Black Swedes' access to other essential areas like employment, political representation, and education. Speaking of education, most people know that Sweden has free education for everyone. But what many people don't know is that Black students often don't get the same opportunities as white students. They tend to go to schools that are poorly funded and lack important resources, making it harder for them to succeed. A 2018 report found that these schools don't even have enough materials or activities to help students grow. On top of that, Black students often deal with unfair treatment from teachers who expect less from them. This can hurt their confidence and performance. They also face tougher punishments for the same behavior as their white classmates. These issues lead to bigger problems that limit Black Swedes' chances in higher education and jobs. To fix this, Sweden needs to address these biases and ensure that all students have equal access to resources and support. Without these changes, the education system will keep reinforcing existing racial inequalities. Now, we're moving into healthcare. Despite Sweden's reputation for having one of the world's most comprehensive healthcare systems, Black Swedes frequently encounter discrimination and unequal treatment within this sector. While healthcare is technically accessible to all citizens, the quality of care Black patients receive often falls short. A 2020 report by the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights revealed troubling patterns of healthcare discrimination, where Black patients reported that their concerns were routinely dismissed or met with less urgency compared to white patients. This lack of respect and consideration can manifest in various ways, from being rushed through medical consultations to having their symptoms downplayed or even ignored. One of the most alarming consequences of this discriminatory treatment is the disparity in health outcomes between Black and white Swedes. Chronic illnesses such as diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular diseases are more prevalent among Black Swedes, yet they are often less likely to receive timely and appropriate care. The systemic biases in Sweden's healthcare system, whether conscious or unconscious, mean that Black patients may not get the same level of preventive care or access to treatments that their white counterparts do. These are the many problems that Black people in Sweden may deal with on a daily basis. Fortunately, despite these persistent challenges, there is hope. The global Black Lives Matter, or BLM movement, has spread across borders, finding resonance in Sweden and prompting important conversations about race and racism within the country. Sweden has long been viewed as a progressive nation, but the BLM movement seeks to tackle the racial issues hidden beneath the surface. It inspires Black Swedes to speak out about their experiences of discrimination and inequality. For many Black Swedes, the BLM movement has become a platform to raise awareness of the systemic racism embedded in Swedish society, ranging from police brutality to everyday microaggressions. The movement sparked a critical moment where Black Swedes pushed back against the colorblind narrative that often dominates public discourse in the country. The movement also sparked a larger public reckoning with Sweden's treatment of its Black population. People are now becoming more open to media discussions about race, which were previously avoided or downplayed. And while these topics are still in their early stages, the presence of BLM in Sweden has made it more difficult for the country to ignore the racial disparities that have long been marginalized. Black Swedes and their allies continue to use social media, protests, and public forums to demand tangible changes, whether in policing, education, healthcare, or employment. Alongside grassroots movements, institutional efforts to tackle racism have started to rise in Sweden. In recent years, several universities have introduced courses on race and racism, and there's been a push for more diversity training across workplaces and government agencies. Some organizations are even rolling out policies aimed at increasing diversity and fostering inclusion. But despite these steps, many believe that these efforts are far from enough to address the deep-rooted racism in Swedish society. Thankfully, there is one area where Sweden has made noticeable progress, and that is in human rights laws. The country is a participant of several international treaties designed to combat racism, like the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Nationally, Sweden has implemented anti-discrimination laws that specifically prohibit racial, ethnic, and skin color discrimination. But with all of that said, Sweden's reputation for fairness and equality can only hold up if it confronts the uncomfortable truths about the racial disparities that still exist. Change won't happen overnight, but Sweden still has the opportunity to become a truly inclusive society, not just in principle, but in action. Thank you for joining us in this eye-opening discussion about Sweden and Black lives. If you found value in this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for similar discussions. Also, Share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep seeking the truth and expanding your understanding of the world.